A used 58-foot sport fish boat sells in North Carolina. The sale price is $1 million. The seller walks away having paid $100,000 in broker commissions he never knew were fixed. His buyer's broker, the one he thought was working for him, collected $50,000 of that, paid by the seller, and never disclosed it. That was the cheap part of the deal. The closing check was smaller than the first year's operating bill. This video is about the financial structure behind that moment and why it repeats itself on marina docks from Florida to the Mediterranean every single season. The yachting trap is not one thing. It is a layered system with 5 moving parts, and every part is designed to profit from someone who does not know the math. Who actually gets rich in the yachting world, and is it ever the owner? Polished hulls gleam beneath showroom lights. Brokers in pressed blazers glide between espresso bars and leather sofas, speaking in the practiced language of possibility. The pitch is never about the boat itself, it is about a new identity. Here, the yacht is a passport to freedom, to status, to a kind of belonging that only exists dockside. The buyer, often successful in every other arena, steps into this world with a mix of calculation and longing. The brochures promise more than a vessel, they promise transformation. Words like investment, equity, and legacy drift through the conversation, but the real hook is always lifestyle. Brokers talk about Mediterranean summers, long weekends in the Bahamas, the silent glide out of the marina at sunrise. They mention family memories, business deals sealed on the aft deck, friendships cemented over sunset cocktails. There is an unspoken suggestion that this is a club with velvet ropes, and the only ticket is the signature at the bottom of the contract. For a moment, the buyer can almost see it. The gentle sway at anchor, the applause of water against the hull, the quiet certainty of having arrived. The pen hovers over the dotted line. The numbers, what they mean and what they hide, are for later. For now, the dream is real, and the only thing left is to step aboard. The numbers. The showroom never mentions are the ones that matter most. First, the baseline. Annual operating costs run between 10 and 15% of the yacht's original purchase price. That means, for a $500,000 boat, the owner should expect to spend $50,000 to $75,000 every single year just to keep the vessel afloat, insured, fueled, and maintained. No exotic breakdowns, no storms, just the routine bill for showing up at the dock. Next, usage. The U.S. Coast Guard's most recent survey puts average recreational boat use at about 55 days per year. That's less than 8 weeks out of 52. Most owners get on the water for a handful of weekends and a single extended trip, if that. The rest of the year, the yacht sits idle, accumulating costs while losing value. Then comes depreciation. Industry-wide data show a new yacht loses between 10 and 20% of its value in the first year alone. By the 5th year, the typical vessel has shed 40 to 50% of its original price. This is not an outlier, it's the expected curve regardless of brand or maintenance. For a $500,000 boat, that is $250,000 gone before the first serious refit. These 3 benchmarks, 10 to 15% in annual costs, 55 days of use, and up to half the value lost in 5 years, form the backbone of the real ownership equation. They are not worst-case scenarios, but the industry's own consensus, drawn from broker guides and Coast Guard data. The dream is sold in broad strokes, but the ledger is written in fine print. Charter programs are often pitched as the rational antidote to yachting's notorious cash burn. The promise is simple: put your boat to work, let paying guests cover the bills, and enjoy the best of both worlds. The reality is governed by thresholds that most owners never cross. According to Vital Charter's internal modeling, the break-even point for a typical 60-foot motor yacht lands between 16 and 20 weeks of paid charter per year. Anything less, and the owner is subsidizing every charter guest out of pocket. The national average for private use, about 55 days a year, falls well short of this threshold, and few owners have the appetite or network to fill a third of the calendar with paying clients. Stretch the lens to a decade. A $3 million yacht, run through a standard charter management program, generates a total outflow of roughly $8.1 million over 10 years. That figure absorbs purchase price, depreciation, operating costs, management fees, and the periodic refits that come with heavy use. The number is not a worst-case scenario. It is the sum of routine invoices, insurance renewals, and the relentless march of marina rate hikes. Charter income, even at a healthy utilization rate, rarely claws back more than a fraction of this drain. The illusion comes from gross revenue. Charter brochures spotlight the top line, $30,000 a week, booked solid for the season. But after management commissions, unscheduled repairs, and the high wear cost curve of commercial use, the net is a shadow of the headline figure. Meanwhile, the same $3 million placed in a broad market index fund would have doubled over the same period, compounding quietly while the yacht's value eroded. The math is not subtle. Over a decade, the real contest is not between yachting and doing nothing. It is between the dream of ownership and the opportunity cost of capital. The numbers do not just favor the market, they expose the lifestyle pitch as a system designed to extract, not to build, wealth for the typical buyer. A $500,000 yacht purchase, mapped line by line, reveals the real mechanics of ownership. The initial outlay is rarely just the down payment. With a standard 25% down, the buyer wires $125,000 to the dealer on day one. The remaining $375,000 is financed, usually at 5% to 6% interest over 5 to 10 years. Year 1 begins with a silent deduction, depreciation. Industry data puts the first-year loss at 15% of the original price, $75,000 erased before the first season ends. The boat is now worth $425,000 on paper, but the loan principal remains untouched. Operating expenses arrive monthly. The 10% rule, accepted by every major brokerage, means $50,000 vanishes over 12 months for dockage, insurance, fuel, maintenance, and the steady drip of marina fees. These are not luxury upgrades or emergencies, just the baseline for keeping the vessel ready. Add annual interest on the loan, which at 5% means roughly $19,000 in year 1 alone. The running total, $75,000 lost to depreciation, $50,000 spent on operations, $19,000 paid in interest, and $125,000 gone in the initial down payment. The first 12 months consumed $269,000 of cash and equity. Year 2 repeats the cycle. Another $50,000 for operations, another $18,000 in interest as the loan balance declines, and an additional 12% depreciation, about $51,000, shrinks the boat's value further. By the end of year 3, the owner faces a cumulative outflow approaching $400,000, not including the original purchase price. The boat itself, now 3 years older, has lost up to 40% of its value, trading at $300,000 to $320,000 on the open market. A looming cost sits just over the horizon. Major refits, engines, hull, electronics arrive around the 5-year mark, often demanding another 10% to 20% of the original price. For many, the decision to sell comes just before this grenade goes off, locking in losses and passing the next round of expenses to the next owner. The ledger does not lie, the system extracts value from the buyer at every step, and the numbers compound quietly year after year. Brokers occupy a unique position in the yachting ecosystem. Their income is tied directly to the deal. A standard 10% commission is split evenly between the listing broker and the buyer's broker. On a $1 million sale, that is $100,000, $50,000 to each side. The seller pays the commission, but the buyer's broker is presented as their advocate. In reality, both brokers are incentivized to close the transaction, not to challenge its wisdom or interrogate the numbers. The commission is not a bonus for exceptional service. It is a built-in cost, baked into every contract, regardless of whether the buyer sails away with a sound investment or a rapidly depreciating asset. This arrangement is no secret within the industry, but it is rarely spelled out for buyers. The International Yacht Brokers Association, or IYBA, which sets the tone for much of the US market, has historically defended the 10% split as fair compensation for expertise and deal management. Yet the lack of transparency has led to legal scrutiny. In 2023, the Lamb versus IYBA antitrust case landed in federal court. The claim was that IYBA members conspired to fix commissions at a flat $50,000 on $1 million transactions. Internal communications cited in the complaint described the fee as fixed and non-negotiable, a direct challenge to the idea of open competition. The case remains unresolved, but its existence confirms that these commission structures are not just tradition. They are protected by industry consensus and at times enforced through opaque agreements. For buyers, this means the person guiding them through the process is paid by the other side and rewarded for closing quickly, not for ensuring long-term value. The advice chain is only as honest as the incentives allow. The moment the contract is signed and the commission is wired, any alignment between buyer and broker dissolves. The system is not accidental. It is engineered to move product, not to build wealth for the person stepping onto the dock for the first time. Referrals and incentives shape every step of yacht ownership. When a buyer asks for a marine survey, the broker's recommendation often comes with quiet expectations. Surveyors who keep deals moving forward are favored, while those who flag too many issues risk being left out of future business. The inspection, paid for by the buyer, becomes less about uncovering problems and more about protecting the sale. Loyalty flows through the broker's network, not to the owner's interests. Charter management follows the same logic. The promise is that chartering will offset costs, but the contract tells a different story. Management fees, locked in at 15 to 20% of gross charter revenue, are deducted before the owner sees a dollar. For every $100,000 earned, $15,000 to $20,000 is claimed by the management company, regardless of whether the owner turns a profit. The contract spells this out, but it is rarely the focus in sales pitches. The manager's priority is bookings, not the owner's bottom line. Marina contracts add another layer. Annual escalation clauses, often buried in the fine print, quietly raise berth fees by 3 to 5% each year. A $1,500 monthly slip can reach nearly $1,700 by the third year. These increases compound, are rarely discussed up front, and only become clear with the next invoice. Escalation is rarely explained at the point of sale. Tax deductions are dangled as a final incentive. The so-called second home deduction is tightly limited. The yacht must qualify as a residence, be used for more than 14 days and at least 10% of rental days, and survive IRS scrutiny. Most owners do not qualify, but the myth persists at the point of sale. Deduction. Language is used to close deals, not to guarantee savings. Each mechanism, survey referral, charter fee, marina escalation, tax myth, ensures service providers get paid first. The owner absorbs the risk and rising costs. Owner A stepped into the marina with a plan that looked solid on paper. The purchase price was $600,000. The down payment was $150,000. The rest was $450,000, financed at 6% interest over 10 years. The first season brought the expected joys, family weekends, a handful of business outings, the sense of having arrived. But by the end of year one, the numbers had already started to slip out of reach. The boat's value dropped by $90,000, 15%, before the first annual service was even due. Operating costs came in right on cue at $60,000, matching the 10% rule quoted by every brokerage. Loan interest alone added $27,000 to the tally. In 12 months, $177,000 was gone, and the boat's market value had slipped to $510,000. Year 2, the pattern repeated. Another $60,000 in operating costs, another $25,000 in interest, and resale value fell by another 12%. $61,000 evaporated from the resale value. By the end of year 3, the boat was worth $360,000. The loan balance stood at $415,000. Selling meant cutting a check just to close out the debt. The owner's equity had been hollowed out by a system that front-loads loss and backloads risk. This is not a cautionary tale about poor planning. It is the statistical median for financed buyers who enter at retail and exit before the first major refit. Owner B believed in the charter offset. The pitch was simple: buy an $850,000 catamaran, sign with a management company, and let paying guests cover the bills. Year 1 delivered $62,000 in gross charter revenue. Management fees, set at 20%, took $12,400 off the top. Heavy charter use drove up maintenance, $28,000 spent on repairs and accelerated wear. That left $21,600 in net income against $127,000 in total ownership costs for the year. The ledger did not lie. The charter program covered less than a fifth of the actual outflow. By year 2, bookings dropped, the charter firm terminated the contract, and the owner was left with a high-hour boat, mounting expenses, and no path to break even. The promise of neutralizing costs through chartering had failed, not because of a bad season, but because the math was never in the owner's favor. Both owners started with different strategies, one with a classic loan, the other with a charter plan. Both ended up in the same place, chasing sunk costs, boxed in by a system that rewards everyone except the person holding the keys. The numbers are not outliers, they are the rule, disguised by glossy marketing and the language of opportunity. Owner C walked into the marina with no illusions about financing or fast returns. This time, there was no bank involved, just a wire transfer for the full price of a lightly used sloop, $220,000, paid in cash. On paper, it looked like a safe harbor, no loan, no interest, no risk of being underwater. But the map was still wrong. The first year brought an unexpected $32,000 in deferred maintenance. The survey had missed corroded rigging and a leaking fuel tank, issues quietly overlooked in the rush to close. The owner paid out of pocket, chalking it up to bad luck, but the pattern was already set. Insurance, which had seemed like a simple checkbox, turned into a moving target. By year 2, the underwriter flagged the hull's age and refused renewal without costly upgrades. The only replacement policy available came with a $15,000 annual premium, more than double the original quote. The marina, meanwhile, had its own escalation clause. The slip fee, $700 a month at signing, rose to $1,000 by the third year, a 43% jump, triggered by a clause buried on page 6 of the contract. The owner, now locked into the berth, watched fixed costs outpace any savings from buying with cash. A three-way cross-section tells the story. Owner A, boxed in by loan payments and a shrinking asset. Owner B, squeezed by charter math and management fees. Owner C, supposedly immune, still drained by hidden maintenance, insurance hikes, and rising marina costs. The specifics differ, but the destination is the same. Whether the entry point is debt, charter, or cash, the system's incentives ensure that costs compound quietly and persistently while value erodes. The only constant across all profiles is that the service providers, brokers, surveyors, managers, marina operators get paid first. The owner, regardless of strategy, absorbs the risk and the loss. The pattern is not accidental, it is engineered by contracts, clauses, and a network of incentives that operate in plain sight. The promise of yachting as a rational asset dissolves when the numbers are laid side by side. What remains is a lifestyle product, sold as an investment, but structured so that the owner is always the last to get paid. Today, the illusion persists. Glossy brochures still frame yachts as assets, not consumables. The real math, depreciation rates exceeding 20% per year, operating costs rivaling mortgage payments, remains buried in fine print. In a market engineered for extraction, clarity is power. The only real windfall belongs to those who read the ledger, not just the dream. The map was never neutral, now you know where it leads.